if people's attitudes on the floor start to become cancerous and cause problems, they're certainly sat down and spoken to. Then they'll be written up. And then if he sees promise in the person, but they're just not getting it, he does something that I found really quite interesting. He actually literally takes them into the parking lot. And then he points back at the building and says, "You want back in there?" And then they discuss all the things that are going to have to change within that person's attitude before they can regain access to the building. Very, very effective.
Welcome to the podcast, Leading Change. I'm your host, Adam Christie. Well, people, I've been waiting a while for this interview, and you're about to see why. This is fantastic. He's got so much great insight and advice that if you just soak in, it's going to take you to the next level of leadership. Our guest today is the author of Turn Can't into Next, which can be found at Amazon, Audible, or the website turncan'tintonext.com. He has ran his business group for over 40 years and has over 300 employees. His group includes ventures into aerospace, engineering, agricultural manufacturing, coating and plating solutions, and it goes on and on. I'll have him talk about that in a minute. He can be found on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and you can find out more about him at cadorath.com. Please join me in welcoming Gerry Cadorath. Gerry, thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Adam, for the invitation to come and chat with you today. I appreciate it.
Oh, love your book. Love everything you talk about and all the tricks and quips you have in there. Let's talk a little bit about your business group at first. You're into a lot of different ventures. Could you talk a little bit about what each of those are?
Yeah, sure. So our company started in 1954 by my father as an electroplating company to support local industry. It's since grown to having one of the longest lists of special processes anywhere available in the world, as we've added several processes to that over the years. And a lot of those processes then were the launch pad for our aviation MRO, maintenance, repair, and overhaul facilities. So we started that in Winnipeg, where we repair engine and dynamic components, dynamic being anything that moves other than engine, on primarily helicopter, but also to a lesser degree fixed wing helicopters. And then we opened another facility in Broussard, Louisiana, just outside of Lafayette, to do the same using different technologies. So we support a global customer base on our MRO side of our business. We also opened several years ago, I'm thinking, it was 1975, we opened a company that manufactures helicoid flighting. People are like, what the heck is that? That's the screw part of a grain auger or an ice auger or a post hole digger or even blades of a snowblower. So we started manufacturing that again in Winnipeg. And then later on in the late 80s, opened another facility in Illinois, just outside the Quad Cities, where we now manufacture completed augers for several OEMs, original equipment manufacturers, throughout North America and beyond. The agricultural companies come also to the special process facility to get extended and extreme wear solutions on a bunch of the products that we manufacture for our agricultural customers. So there's a lot of internal synergies. And along the way, we ended up being in the helicopter piece part distribution business. So what we do there is we buy primarily engines from around the world that are, say, timed out. We then bring those engines in, we tear them down into piece parts. We run the piece parts through our reworks or MRO facilities, who in turn rely on our special process facility for some of that. And then we sell overhaul conditioned aircraft parts for installation into aircraft to our global customer base. The last business that we started was we partnered up with a fella down in Broussard, Louisiana, who has a vast knowledge of rebuilding helicopters. So what we do is we buy tired helicopters, we bring them in and we strip them right down to the bones, and then we completely refurbish them and then they're available for sale or lease.
So, Gerry, let me ask you this. Whenever you talk to somebody about business or when you watch, say, Shark Tank or whatever, they say, you have to be focused on one thing. And
Yeah.
so, how did it work out that do you feel like you are spread into many different things, or do you feel like it's the same thing that you put into different groups?
In a lot of ways, we use the special process facility as the launch pad, especially in the aviation side. There was just a desire to grow into new markets and to look for other opportunities where we could grow our business. I don't feel as though we're widely spread. Our leadership team has their head tightly wrapped around what it is we do. Although I will admit, when we bring in new players, it does take them some time, a matter of sometimes years, to wrap their head fully around the markets that we serve, and how we serve them.
Hmm.
It brings a lot of fun to life because there's always new challenges. There's when one market is up, another market may be down, and there's always challenges in all different areas. So it brings a lot of fun to life.
So, are you guys in the stock market then?
No, we are not. We're just privately held.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
How do you know when you talked about new people, getting new people on board? When you're looking to hire someone, what do you look for in leadership potential?
What we're looking for is really an attitude among the people that we bring in. They have to fit the culture that we've spent decades creating. And that's a culture of openness and sharing of ideas. And they have to be the type of person who's going to not bring ego to the party. Leave that, check it at the door. You got to be willing to work with people. You got to be willing to listen to ideas. You got to be willing to look at other people's perspectives on different things. And so those are the type of people that are willing to take risks, in the pursuit of growth that we look for in leadership.
But you're also you're primarily a family business.
Yes.
What's it like to take somebody into that leadership circle, but they're not a part of the family? Is that tricky?
No, it's not tricky. Not at all. I mean, I do have some of my children and stepson and son-in-law working within the business. Some of them have leadership roles, others not. But everybody has to recognize that we have to surround ourselves with the strongest people available to us. I've always had the attitude that you have to look for the strongest people that you can find and put them in those strong positions.
Now, do you think that you can find a strong leader that's not necessarily trained in that particular niche and then put them in there because they're a strong leader, they'll figure it out, or do they need to have some sort of background?
Well, a lot of the leaders that we currently have in our organization are people that came up through the organization over time. So they had, exposure to different parts of our business over several years. We have historically, we've tried to bring in people from the outside, and although we have had some successes, we've probably had more failures than successes. So to answer your question, the people that we're putting into the leadership positions already have considerable strength in the area where we're putting them.
How do you define a leader? What is your definition of a leader?
Well, a leader for me is it's pretty simple, Adam. I mean, it's anybody in your organization. They don't have to hold a title. They don't have to be a supervisor or manager. It's anybody in your organization that's willing to grab any given ball that's put in front of them and run with it. If they see a project and they want to run with it, and they have the passion and the desire, and if they can encourage and impassion others to follow them on the journey, they're a natural leader. And those are the kind of people that we're looking for all the time. Fortunately, we're pretty much surrounded by them at this point.
Um, so your dad owned the business. He
Yeah,
started it, right?
he did. Yeah.
Okay. And do you have siblings?
I have four sisters. None of them are active in the business.
Okay, so it was always known that you were going to be the one to take over.
Yeah, it was an old school, I guess, mentality. The son is going to end up taking over the business. There were times where I'm sure that my dad second guessed that decision, but nonetheless, here we are. we had some turbulent times. There's no doubt about it.
How much did turbulent times in the helicopter?
Yeah.
I get it. How long did you work with him in the business?
He started bringing me in there when I was like a 4-year-old kid on the weekends, and I would do stuff while he was off busy. But I started working in the summer when I was off school when I was 13 years old. And, so I started learning right then. When I was 17, I got into, my share of trouble. And my dad actually was no longer talking to me, but my mom wanted me to go to work for him. So he begrudgingly gave me a job at 17. And he passed in 2015. So, I worked for him for, 35 years. So he gave me a lot of lessons along the way.
Would you say you guys were close?
We became close. You know, we were far from close when he hired me at 17. He had not spoken to me in some time. That's how bad things got. But it was my fault. I was a stupid kid. But over time, over the years, things improved. And for probably the last 15 to 20 years, well, at least the last 20 years that I was working for him, we had a really, really great relationship. We were very close. I used to phone him if he would winter in Florida. So if he was down there, I'd phone him like a couple times a week. We'd talk about business and what was good, what was bad, what were we going to do, and things like that. When he was in town, of course, we would meet on a regular basis. We got very close.
So you grew and you evolved, from the kid you were when he hired you. Did you feel like he changed over the years?
He softened. He definitely softened over the years. When I started with the business, it was very much an iron fist type of mentality. He started it as a one man company, so when he brought in new people, he had his thumb firmly on what they did, how they did it, when they did it, so forth. As the company grew, that mentality kind of hung on, and I didn't like it at all. It really was a bothersome thing for me. And I vowed that I was going to do things differently. And then as I started, getting, more control over different parts of the business, he was seeing the management style change. He, in the beginning, wasn't very happy with it, but his attitude was, "It's your mess. You're going to be cleaning it. So carry on." And then at the end, he was just, he had softened considerably for sure.
Hmm.
And he actually came to appreciate the shift in the management style that had taken hold at Cadorath.
How long were him and your mom married for?
They were just, oh boy, they were just shy of, they were in around 40 plus years. My mom passed in 95.
What was her relationship like with the business? Was it completely separate? She raised the kids like in the olden days and he did the business?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. She was the stay-at-home mom, and she took care of the house, took care of the family, and he was off to work. So
Hmm.
that's she didn't really get involved at all in the business.
So let's just talk about your dad just a little bit more. Um, how did he start the business? What did he start in exactly? Did he ever tell you like I only had so many dollars in my pocket and I started this? How did that start?
It's a funny story, actually, one that been told many times over the years. But when he got kind of thrown out of the military, the story is he had 24 jobs in the first year out of the military. He just couldn't find anything that he liked. He couldn't find anything he was good at. So he cast about quite a bit. He then got a job in an electroplating company, and he loved it. And it was, if you've ever been in an electroplating company, today they're different than they were 50 years ago, but 65 years ago when he started, they were very smelly, very dirty, very dangerous, loud places. But he loved the work. And he was able to get a loan from my father-in-law for $600, which, I mean, you got to remember, he had a wife and a child, and they were living on $25 a week. So he got a loan from my father-in-law for $600, and he set it up in a little tiny room in a building in a rundown part of downtown. and set it up to do hard chrome plating and cadmium plating initially for local industry. He would plate in the evenings, and then in the mornings he would be running around doing pickups and deliveries and calling on prospects, and then back to work plating in the evenings. So we didn't see much of him, when I was a really little kid. That, of course, changed over time, but as he started, finding employees, and he was able to, back away a little bit.
So my dad's truck driver, and so yeah, he was gone a lot too. Did you ever wish that that would have been different, that he would have been around more as a kid?
It never dawned on me. It's just the way it was.
Hmm.
It's just the way it was. So it never really dawned on me. Now, as I was, a lot of these years, you have to remember, were either before I was born or when I was really tiny. As I started getting a little older, my parents got a place at the lake. So we were spending weekends together. And, it was just kind of a given that during the week, you weren't going to see him until later on. Like, he'd show up at home at 5, dinner 5:30, and stuff like that. We'd have the evenings together.
Well, let's dive into your book.
Okay.
Your book turned can't into next. What made you write it?
Well, I had a lot of people come to me over the years and suggest that I wrote a book. There were changes that I made in the business that were a result of some things that I just couldn't tolerate in the early days, that iron fist mentality. And you know, it was so strong, it ran rampant through the organization. I remember one time we were having trouble. This was many years into my career at Cadorath. I was selling for the agricultural company, and we were having a problem with a part from one of my customers. And in those days, the management would meet in the lunchroom at coffee break, and I was made clear: be there, shut up, listen, learn. And so there was a problem with this part, and the vice president and the general manager were tossing around ideas, and but they weren't getting any closer to a solution. I went to the VP after that meeting, and I said, I noticed you didn't talk to any of your operators about a possible solution. Have you considered, asking them? And he looked at me, and it confounds me to this day. And he said, I hired their backs, not their brains. And he walked away, and it was like, wow, this is just not going to fly for me. We had millions, not millions, we had buildings full of people with knowledge, and they were working in an environment that, wasn't conducive to sharing of that knowledge. And I knew that that had to change. And so I went about making those changes in the organization. And so why did I write the book? There's a few reasons for writing the book. Is we've spent decades building a culture of sharing in our organization. And I wanted to write it as a kind of a roadmap, I guess, if you will, for the up and comers in our organization, and anybody in our organization really, but primarily aimed at the up and comers, as kind of a roadmap on how to behave, how to treat one another, what the expectations were from them as an individual, as they grew into a leader, how to treat the world around you, how to treat our customers, and so forth. So it was a roadmap. That was one reason I wrote it. The other reason was like a marketing piece. I've always been interested in market disruption, and I don't know of anybody in the markets that we serve that has written a book to sell their wares and to show their prospects and teach their prospects what they can expect by entering into a relationship with us. So that was an important piece for me. And thirdly, I thought if I could help any other up and coming leaders out there by learning from some of the mistakes that we've made along the way and the lessons that we learned as a result of it, that would be kind of my way of paying the whole thing forward.
So that gentleman that told you that, were you his superior at the time?
No, I was definitely not. He was one of the high end managers. I was a sales guy, but it boggled my mind. It was like, man, this is just running everywhere.
You're essentially diagnosing the culture of the company that you see. and you say, we need to change this culture. It's not healthy. It's not where it needs to be. How long did that take for you to change?
It really took decades. It truly did. It was so ingrained into the culture of the business, this iron fist mentality, that it took a long time. I had to start gaining control over certain parts of the business before I could start, getting those changes, made. And I'm going to say it was probably in around the late 80s where, I kind of had an epiphany. I had this manager, a quality manager, that was like, he was a relentless guy. He would come to me multiple times a day. This is a problem. That's a problem. We have a problem here. And he was just relentless. He never quit. This went on for months. And finally, one day I said to him, enough. He's coming to my office. I closed the door. I said to him, you know what? Don't you ever, ever bring me another problem. Ever. You bring me solutions, never problems. If I have to solve your problems, I don't need you. And it was a magical day because that was the day I realized that I was just a manager and I was just solving everyone's problems for them. And I knew that I needed to create a organization of people who were learners, who were doers, who were actors. And it was magical because after that day, people started coming to me with solutions to problems. I made it my new motto: bring me solutions, never problems. And people started doing it. And they'd come to me and we would sit down and we would chat. And maybe we'd go with their solution, maybe we wouldn't. But at least now we're working together. And at least now he's thinking. And they're all thinking. And they're all looking for ways then to improve. That's part of it. And the other part of it is you got to get the naysayers out of your organization. The people that do things that are counterproductive to what you're trying to do. We talk about the three deadly sins in the book, and the three deadly sins were really part of this that we had to overcome. And the first one is the stealing of ideas. When a manager or a supervisor steals an idea from one of their reports, that the destruction that creates is so profound, and it goes on for so long. I don't know that you can actually calculate it. It's insane. I had it happen to me. I've had it happen to me many times over my career in the early days, where you would come up with an idea, and the next thing you know, the manager owns it. When people that steal those ideas do those things, they rob the employee of the joy of being a contributing member of your family, of the family that you're working with. They rob the company of intellectual capital. They rob the customer. They rob everybody. And so I learned long ago that those kind of people had to go. And so we started on actively rooting them out. And I mean, I've fired people on the spot, and so have others in my leadership team, for doing just exactly that, because they might be good, but it doesn't matter the value that you perceive they bring you. If they're going to continue to undermine what you are trying to cultivate, they're just going to lead to a toxic environment, and you'll lose good people as a result of them. So that's one of the sins that has to be overcome. If
And
you
the
want to hear the
second
other
one?
two, I'm happy
Yeah,
to
yeah,
share
yeah.
them.
That was my next question. So, what's the other two?
Well, the next one is perfectionism. I've worked with many perfectionists over my career, and in my experience, they are very inflexible. It's so difficult to move a new project or a new initiative forward with a perfectionist, or even to accept somebody else's idea, because if it's not their idea, it's not perfect, and therefore there's no sense moving forward on it. I've watched those environments, and I've seen people keep their thumb on each and every tiny detail of what goes on underneath them. None of the people that work around them grow because nobody's allowed to make a decision. And you almost can't move an initiative forward. The only way that you can move an initiative forward, in my experience with the perfectionist, is to plant a seed. Plant the seed, back away, wait, see if it blossoms. If it doesn't take root, come back and try in a different way, and then wait. So it hampers growth. It hampers creative thinking. It hampers critical thinking. It's just not a good thing. And then the third one is failure to execute. you know, there's a lot of people that have great plans and they don't execute them. And that could be, it could be, I've seen it in the past as a result of perfectionism. They have to wait until the plan is perfect or they don't move forward because heaven forbid they fail. And even worse, heaven forbid anybody witness them fail. So there's that reason why plans and initiatives don't get moved forward in several organizations. But another one that's a huge factor is that if a person is working in an organization that punishes mistakes, there's no incentive. There's no incentive to take a risk. And so you have to create an environment that mistakes are not punishable offenses. Rather, they're learning opportunities. We make mistakes all the time because we're constantly looking for new ways to do things. And nobody gets punished. Nobody says, hey, you made a mistake. No, quite on the contrary, people dive in and what can we learn from this mistake? How are we going to refine our path so that we can move forward and push the initiative along? And that goes to leadership. That's what I was talking to you about earlier. The people that can, impassion and empower others to go along the journey with them. But by all means, keep that ball moving forward. And those are the three deadly sins.
There's so much greatness. You could write a book just on those three deadly sins.
Yeah.
That's just a chapter of your fantastic book.
Well, thank you.
So when you're saying turn can't into next, would that be another way of saying turning no into yeses?
Absolutely. I don't accept no, and I don't accept can't. I mean, and nor does the culture any longer of our organization accept those two words. Maybe we don't know how. Maybe we've never done it before, but we'll find a way. So yes, they're very, very much the same. There's always a way if you just keep looking for it. But you've got to be willing to fail along the way, and embrace the failure and learn from it. Mm-hmm. And it takes time to build that culture. It doesn't just happen overnight.
Talking about culture a little bit more.
Yeah.
How much of that would you say was an embodiment of your father? And how much of it was like character? I mean, as far as were the characteristics of him that just seeped into the company, or was it stuff that he did not squash and so it just kind of festered?
You mean the iron fist mentality that was initial?
Well, all the stuff that you saw that you were just like, this is kind of the iron fist, but I mean, there's other unhealthy things. Were they all characteristics of him, or were the stuff that he just didn't squash?
They weren't all characteristics of him. I mean, he over the years began to grow very weary of some of the actions of some of the people, but he was prepared to put up with those actions because of the perceived value that he felt they brought in other areas of the organization. So I would say to you that it was his desire to not quash them so much as allow them to continue. Not so much that he didn't encourage this sort of behavior. I mean, I remember listening to him give it to people over the years over some of their behavior, but he did allow it to continue. And I made a conscious decision that there's just simply no room for it. Those people have no place in our organization whatsoever.
When do you use punishment as opposed to coaching? And is punishment a part of coaching? Is it all through conversation that you can correct people, or is it that you have to impose, you're getting a write-up or something like that? When do you decide to go to that punishment level?
If we see supervisors or managers mistreating their people, we've pretty much reached a point where there's no room for that in the organization. I mean, they'll probably get maybe one warning, and if they do it again, they're out the door. Now, when you're talking about the people that are on the floor, a lot of the stuff that we do is fairly in-depth, complex processes, and they require a considerable amount of finesse and training. So we try to focus on providing all the training and all the tools that they need and recognize that mistakes are going to happen. And it's okay. So then we sit down and we talk about, okay, what happened? What went wrong? What are we going to do different next time to see to it that it doesn't happen again? And what did we learn from this? Now, if it's an attitude issue, um, it's interesting, and I talk about this in the book. My COO has a very interesting technique. If people's attitudes on the floor start to become cancerous and cause problems, they're certainly sat down and spoken to. Then they'll be written up. And then if he sees promise in the person, but they're just not getting it, he does something that I found really quite interesting. He actually literally takes them into the parking lot. And then he points back at the building and says, "You want back in there?" And then they discuss all the things that are going to have to change within that person's attitude before they can regain access to the building. Very effective. Some people don't come back, but the ones that do, at least 90% of them have turned into really good employees. Total attitude shift. Very effective. I love that technique. I wish it was mine, but
Sounds like a great manager right there.
yeah.
So what's it like working with family? Is it, some people say don't do business with family, it'll just wreck it. How have you negotiated it?
Well, I mean, of course, I worked for my dad, like I said, for about 35 years, and there were very turbulent times over those years. I got fired once, I quit once, but we found a way. We found a way over the years to ultimately gain mutual respect for one another and move the ball forward. Now I have, like I said, I have children, stepson, son-in-law working for me. Um, there's in some cases there's I don't know how I maybe a bit of a internal struggle for who's going to get further up the ladder quicker type of thing, and so there's that. But it's instilling in family members that you're not, just because your name is on the building doesn't mean that you're going to get any special treatment, because you're not. In fact, the expectation is that you're going to work harder and you're going to work smarter and you're going to work longer and you're going to show everyone around you respect. And if you can do those things and prove that you are part of the culture, then you're going to grow in the organization. We have titles in our organization, but people call me Gerry, and that's what I want them to call me. I don't, none of this Mr. Cadorath crap. I don't go for that. It's kind of funny because in Louisiana, those people are just so polite,
Mhm.
and I remember the guy that was running the facility, he's moved on and we have another fellow there now, but this mentality continues, and he would call me sir. And I'd be like, "Dave, please just call me Gerry." And he respond with, "Yes, sir." It's like, you can't beat it. Um, Now in Louisiana, it's more often I hear Mr. Gerry. I get it. It's part of their culture. There's a lot of respect in that part of the world. But the point I'm getting at is that we're all team members. We're
Mhm.
all there to help one another. It's not like you don't answer to me. In fact, I flipped the hierarchy of the organization upside down, and I did it very specifically so that I answer to my leadership team. I make sure they have the organizational freedom, the funding, the tools, the mentoring, and the empowerment to run the organization. And they answer to their management, their supervisors in much the same way. And then the supervisors answer to the people that create value for our customers each and every day. They're the ones that are providing the tools and the training, removing roadblocks, reducing fatigue, improving safety, so that we're constantly on the lookout for how do we improve our level of service to our internal customer. And so the family members then know this and they buy into this, and this is how they behave in this environment.
Um, when you have an evaluation for one of those superiors, is it their superior that does the evaluation, or is it the people that's under them that does the evaluation?
It's often both. So what'll happen is a superior or a peer will do the evaluation, but in the process, they're canvassing that person's either direct reports or indirect reports or internal customers to get feedback on that person's behavior.
Hmm.
So it's a kind of a family affair.
How involved do you get? I think you kind of mentioned, how people bring you solutions and whatnot. But how involved do you get with the smaller details of your business? Do you let that all go to your managers and leaders? How involved do you get?
Yeah, I leave the details to the detail guys. I mean, they're far better at it than I am. I've never been a day-to-day details. That's never been my forte. That's never been an area that I actually enjoy. Um, those people are far better suited to take care of the details. So, when my leadership and I meet, we discuss strategy, we discuss, expansion opportunities, we discuss new markets, we discuss issues in the markets, maybe some issues that we're having in one of our manufacturing or R&O facilities, those sorts of things. But day-to-day details, no, I don't. I don't get involved.
So let's talk about succession planning. Do you know who will be replacing you?
Yeah, that's a great question. The short answer is no, I do not. Um, the longer answer is I thought it was going to be easy. I truly did. I thought, oh, that's going to be a piece of cake. Several years ago, I identified one of my sons to take over the business, and we started the training process. But he had other ideas. He wanted to move on to open his own business, and I wish him very well. He has since come back to the company. He still has his other business, which is quite successful, but he's come back to the company and he's starting up again. But we had to make a decision then that, okay, the path that I thought we were going to follow, that we're not going to follow. So we had to look a different way. So, as I've pointed out, we've spent decades building leaders in our organization, and we identified a small team of leaders, each with their own discipline, each with their own strengths, each with their own weaknesses, about 5 years ago, 6 years ago now. And we started grooming them to ultimately take over my chair. And, my COO and my CFO, they're in their early 50s. They figure they got 14-ish years left, which it doesn't give us a ton of time. When you think about we're not a big company, but we're complex. So there's a lot of moving parts. So to get one or more of those candidates to a point where they can oversee all of these moving parts, we've only got about another 10 years, because then we want about a 5-year window to slowly back away and let them slowly take the reins away. So that's kind of the path. That is the path that we're currently on. So we're hopeful that one will emerge as a natural leader, and that the others will stay on to round out the top leadership team for the next generation. When you look at third generation statistics for success, I mean, we both know they're quite dismal. They're quite dismal. So we don't have any delusions that, this is going to be a cakewalk. We take this very seriously. So we do keep this ball moving forward on a regular basis. And we're very hopeful. And at this point, we're confident that there will be a natural leader emerge.
Now you fly,
I do.
right?
Yes.
Do you also know how to fly a helicopter too, or just airplanes?
No, I do not know how to fly a helicopter. We partnered with the fella in Broussard, Louisiana, that runs our helicopter business. He's a helicopter pilot. And he's given me the stick a couple of times, and it's a completely different animal. I got to tell you, it's flying an airplane's a piece of cake compared to flying a helicopter.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, yeah.
What do you love about flying?
I love the freedom. I love the ability to hop in my plane and just go somewhere. you know, uh, Prior to this mess that's happening in the world, my wife and I would get in the plane and, well, we would fly to Louisiana for the winter. And then from there, we would fly to different places. We'd go on a few day trip to the Keys, or we'd go to San Antonio, or we'd go here or go there. It's just it's the freedom to get in the plane and just go. In a couple of hours, you're somewhere that would take you all day or longer to drive.
Mhm.
So I love that freedom, and I love being up in the air. And you don't really think of anything other than flying. Head in the cockpit. What am I? I'm focused on this. I'm not really worried about anything else that's going on in the world around me. So it's great. It's a good feeling.
What part of your business are you most passionate about? Which part of your business do you think gets you the most excited, the most fired up?
There's no question about that. I mean, I started the aviation side of the business, and so that's where my true passion lies. It's exciting. It's the growth potential, the opportunities are there. We're always looking at new technologies. We're always looking at new markets. It's fun. It's engaging. It's challenging. It's my favorite. I shouldn't play favorites, but I have to admit it. It's the truth. You know.
Do you think your company knows that?
Yeah, probably. Well, I mean, but our special process company, does a lot of support for the aviation side, so they're very much involved. And I mean, our agricultural side of our business is doing some very exciting things at this time as well. We're currently onboarding in our group two of the largest whales in the world in the markets that we serve. And one of those is in aviation and the other is in agriculture. So there's a lot of fun stuff going on the agricultural side of our business right now too. So yeah, I mean, it's fun. It's great.
Mhm.
It's not aviation.
I've seen a lot of families have some big tiffs in inheritance. And when you have somebody very successful, it seems like that might even be more so. Uh, what has been your process? How did you save relationships, I guess, in your dad's inheritance? And how do you negotiate that going forward for your kids?
Well, we haven't saved all the relationships in my dad's inheritance.
Mhm.
To answer that question, I have two sisters that I speak with, and I have two sisters that I don't.
And that was
Uh,
solely based on inheritance?
Uh, it started years prior, but
Mhm.
there was certainly a trigger there that caused somewhat of a rift
Mhm.
that I have no desire to repair. So,
Mhm.
um, and with my children, that's a real good question. You know what? The answer to that remains to be seen. So we'll see where it goes. I
Mhm.
have I have a daughter and a son who are actively involved in the business, and I have a daughter and I have a stepson who's actively involved, and I have a son-in-law who's actively involved, and I have a daughter and a son who are not involved. And frankly, my other son, he doesn't want anything to do with the business. They all still have a very good relationship with one another,
Mhm.
but I think the answer to your question remains to be seen.
So, my grandma and grandfather, they had a farm. And so, when the farm sold after they passed away, yes, there was a clash as far as inheritance goes. And one of the things that when I talked to my grandma about it, because obviously that quarrel started before she died, she said that she just wanted them to get along more than anything. I didn't really care how it turned out as far as the money was concerned. She just wanted her kids to get along. Do you feel the same way about your kids?
I do. I really want them to be able to get along into adulthood. I mean, my dad wanted and my mom wanted that for their children. It's a natural thing for parents to want that, but you don't always get what you want. So
Mhm.
unfortunately, we don't always get what we want.
What would you say is the reason that your company is successful and other companies that are kind of in your field that they are not successful?
I don't think you could put it down to one single thing that we've done. Um, but creating that culture of openness and sharing um, is part of it. Um, Many years ago, I realized that I had been guilty of doing one of the things that I consider to be a sin, and that is that I made customer care in our organization responsible to production. And that doesn't work because then customer care has no voice. And with the day that I realized that, the very next day, I went in and I made the change, and I made, as of that very day, customer care answered directly to me so that we could then have more focus on the customer. Customer care became truly the eyes, ears, and voice of our customer within our walls. So we started to shift from a production oriented business more so to a customer centric organization. We didn't participate in the race to the bottom, and I call it the race to the bottom, that so many other people have done, where they've slowly taken away services, taken away perks, taken away everything, taken away human contact. You call a place, you can't even get a hold of a human being anymore. Instead, we took the battle to where our competitors were not, and we focused on creating a customer centric organization. We've done so many different things. I don't know how I won't even be able to list them all, but we've very purposefully created multi-level lines of communications with our customer base. So yes, customer care is in constant communication with the customer, but so is our QA with theirs. So is our engineering with theirs. So is our R&D department with theirs. That goes for finance. That goes for every aspect of our organization. We've very purposefully done this so that we're making sure that we're taking care of the customer's needs. We canvass the customers on a regular basis. We take their temperature. What is it that we're doing right? I mean, it's nice to hear what you're doing right, but more importantly, what are we not doing that's fully satisfying your needs? What could we do for you that may solve a problem that we're not even aware of at this time? And those sorts of discussions trigger creative thinking and new products and new processes that we can then bring to the market. It's just, I don't know, it's and we've created the culture. Again, we come back to the culture. It comes back to people wanting to engage in what they do. They spend more time at work than they do with their families. So make a place where they actively, anxiously engage. And these are, I guess, the quick way to answer the question. I'm sure I didn't cover all of it, but we've done a lot of things.
All right. So as we close out, what would be your closing encouragement for all of our listeners and leaders?
Well, that's interesting because I've worked with people who they had to be the smartest person in the room. They might have been a department head or managing one of our business units. And they had to be the smartest person in the room. And so what they did was they surrounded themselves by people of lesser skills. And if somebody inadvertently got hired in their group that had some more knowledge or skill than them, it didn't take them long to run them out of town. And as a result, they're personally and emotionally exhausted. Their department and or business unit never really reaches its full potential. They flounder about forever, and they ultimately fail. And I just never understood that mentality. And I read a story many years ago about a leader who he sent each of his managers a set of nested dolls. And you would open the biggest doll, and inside revealed a smaller but identical replica, and so on and so forth. And inside the smallest doll, he had written a note, and it read something to the effect of, if we surround ourselves with people lesser than ourselves, we'll become a company of dwarfs. If, on the other hand, we surround ourselves with those greater than ourselves, we'll become a company of giants. And so, I took that lesson to heart. And I've took that lesson to heart, and that's the lesson that we teach and preach at Cadorath today. And we have strong leaders as a result who have surrounded themselves with strong teams. So, what do I want to leave you with? I think that leadership is really simple. I mean, it's not easy. And for some people, it might be flat out impossible. but it comes down to 4 steps. I mean, as long as you're building the culture of creativity and sharing of knowledge and what have you, then, step number 1 is you got to leave your ego at the door. There's no room for ego in a leadership position. You're a teacher. That's what you're there to be. And you should actually have a good, solid, strong dose of humility, right? Step 2 is you have to do some soul searching. You have to look at where you're weak. I mean, we all have strengths, we all have weaknesses. The sooner we recognize our weaknesses, the sooner we can do something about it. But you got to be honest, and this is where the humility comes in. So once you've identified where you're weak, step 3 is you surround yourself with the strongest people that you could possibly find to fill those roles. It's not hard. Well, it's simple. It's not easy for everyone, but if you surround yourself with the strongest you can find, remember the nested doll story. Surround yourself with giants, and fourth and finally, mentor those people, guide them, coach them in the culture that you're creating, provide them the tools and the funding, and most importantly, empower them to do what you brought them there to do. It's that simple. I mean, like I said, simple, but for some people, difficult.
Great. You saved a gem for less, that's for sure. Well, Gerry, thanks so much for spending some time with us.
Thank you, Adam.
Again, if you want to find out more about Gerry Cadorath or his business group or find his book, you can go to either the description below, we'll have links to it, or you can go to turncantintonext.com. You can go to Amazon. It's available in paperback. It's on Audible. You can get it on Kindle. Get it. You obviously heard he has so much great wisdom and advice. Get his book, read it, soak it in. It could change your culture, which could change your life. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope we'll catch you next time on the podcast, Leading Change.